Hello, everyone. This is Mike and Rainbow, and we're going to do a discussion, kind of a roundtable on alien abductions. So, get started. I just wanted to say, when I lived in the southeastern part of the United States in Georgia, I probably did about, I think it was over 1,500 contactee, abductee interviews over about an 18-year period of time. And so I was looking through my notes the other day, and I came across some information I'd gotten from abductees primarily. And so I kind of put a little composite together just to get this discussion going a little bit and show you what goes through the minds of people that have been abducted. So I'm going to kind of read that and put my glasses on and read this. And here we go. Realizing after many abductions to suddenly and crudely be awakened from a deep sleep and having these ungodly creatures staring right into your eyes while their face is in your face as they quickly touch your temple. I immediately felt the touch of a long, smooth finger touching the side of my temple. Calmness seems to set in immediately, right at the start of the abduction, calming me to not fight or scream against their actions. I believe this action of theirs puts their human abductees to sleep while they are transported to a terrestrial ship. The reactions of my body were not moving at 90 miles an hour, meaning that they were basically in slow motion. As screaming as loud as I could scream. This repeated action wasn't necessarily true because there was also some experiences during the daytime and nighttime abductions that did occur when the abductee is awake and physically transported by a light beam into a waiting ship while being paralyzed but fully awake against their will. And that kind of segue my talk, my discussion into another experience that was related to me by somebody that used to work with me. So when I was in Georgia, I worked for a company, a logistics company that I had, quite a few people that worked for me. And this one person, her name was Darla. She was one of my, I guess I'll call her my star supervisor. She was interested that I was interested in UFOs and abductions and other paranormal things, but she was very skeptical. So we would still have our discussions, and she would, put her 2 cents in, and I was very open to everything she had to say. But what happened one day was pretty incredible. Her and her friend Bonnie, what they used to do is on Sunday mornings, they used to deliver in the rural areas of Georgia, used to deliver the Atlanta Journal. And at that time, this was in the 80s now, that was a pretty lucrative, you could make some pretty good money driving around delivering the Sunday morning paper. And so what happened was they had done this many times before with and it was the same route, etc. But something happened very differently, and it's pretty incredible. So they were coming over this kind of this rise or this hill, and they kind of looked down into a really nice subdivision of the Atlanta metropolitan area. And to their amazement, there was a huge ship. There was a huge ship, and what they saw was incredible. They saw a column of light, a beam of light that was projected into the middle of the subdivision, and there were people and animals and all kinds of stuff like floating up this column of light. And they sat there and watched it for about 15 minutes to their amazement. And suddenly, after about 15 minutes of watching, they were pretty much in kind of suspended animation, just watching this. And suddenly the ship blinked out, and that was the end. Well, shortly after that, in fact, I believe on that Sunday, for some reason, I was in at work. I got this call about 7 o'clock in the morning. Now, remember, they were out around 3:30, 4 o'clock. So she told me the story, and she never was, well, I shouldn't say never, but at least for the next 2 weeks, she never was the same.
Did she get abducted, do you think?
Well, I always say there's this 100-foot or 3 football field rule. I always say that if you're within 3 football fields of where the action is,
Yeah, I agree.
I think you're going to be abducted. Even though you think you're on the outside looking in, chances are you also got
Yeah, they just put the block there.
Right. So my chances are she was. I think she said she thought, I asked her the same question that Rainbow just asked me. And I think she said she thought she was like, maybe, 1,000 feet, maybe a little bit more, but she said it was hard to tell. In fact, she even told me when she went back, the next week or so, she was going to check it out. But if she did, she never came back and told me. And I never asked her again. But anyways, I thought it was a pretty amazing thing. And she was very much a skeptic. Both of them saw this as 2 witnesses. And they just said there was, it looked like there was dogs and there was animal. There was definitely people going up there. I think she even said there was a cow. I thought that was unusual. The reason I said it was unusual.
Was it in the city or?
No, it was like a suburb. It was like a kind of a mix, urban,
kind of like
rural.
Where we live.
Sort of like we live. It has a little bit of everything around it. So anyway, so that was a pretty amazing story, I thought. So anyways, that was kind of it. So Rainbow, what did do you have something you want to discuss a little bit?
I'd like to start off with saying that this is actually what brought Michael and I together, because I had been looking for, I actually was in New Mexico, and I tried to contact somebody from MUFON in New Mexico, and I couldn't ever get them to contact me back. And it didn't matter who I talked to, they just weren't very good at that time. And this is back around 2011. And I then found Norio Hayakawa's name, and I contacted Norio, and it took me a while to we emailed back and forth, and then finally I was able to meet him, and he told me to meet with him at Michael's group, the New Mexico UFO and Paranormal Forum. And the whole point of me to meet everybody was because I had, when I turned 40, a bunch of memories come back to me of a lot of abductions, of a lot of training that happened with Greys. But even before that, I still had memories that stayed with me when I was a child that had to do with abductions. And so it's a very personal thing when you're dealing with trying to find answers. And so I thought, well, Michael's group is going to help me find those answers. But what I realized is that Michael's group actually created more questions, which happens when you're looking for answers, because the paranormal just kind of is this endless abyss of just,
it's very layered.
It's like, yeah, like an onion, and
right.
you pull layers off, and then you find out there's even more than what you realized. But what I, as an experiencer and abductee myself, the one thing that I realized is that what they do is that they make you feel special. And I remember when I was a little girl and they would take me in the middle of the night, they always made me feel special. And they always said they had something unique they wanted me to do. And I always worked with other children, which I found was interesting, because I always wondered, do those kids, now that they're adults in my age, would they be wondering the same thing as me? And I'm sure they have. And I wasn't just dealing with one Gray, I was seeing many. And what's really interesting, once you're a part of that type of phenomena, the Grays become average and ordinary. And that's just one thing they do to children. Children are so accepting and so open. I mean, they might see that something or someone in front of them is strange and crazy, but then they'll go ahead and accept it.
Yeah, and the Grays kind of, a lot of the Grays, not all of them, but a lot of them are fairly short.
Like 3 feet?
Right, they're fairly short.
Like my height, or well, actually they were, well, at certain times we were the same height, but other times I was taller.
Right.
And the one thing that I found really interesting, and I don't know if other abductees experience this, and I was wondering, I was going to ask you, is that they did a lot of telepathy with me. And so for many years, I was able to understand them in my mind. So when I went to school, I found that I had a hard time learning because I was trained and taught a different way of communication for so long. And so when I went to this Catholic school, it was in Albuquerque, they told my parents that I was retarded. And, you know, and I say that in a very compassionate way, because I mean, they said not only did I have learning disabilities, but my IQ was low. And I don't think that's what it was. There's a whole lot of, there's another story that goes to that, but they just, when you're a child and you're always having people talk to you in your head, and I'm actually writing an article right now about this called The Voices in My Head, because the Greys were always talking to me. And as a child, your parents think, oh, well, you have an invisible friend, and then you're just kind of making this up. And then your imagination is just going, you know, out of whack, and you're just whatever. Because parents can kind of rationalize anything they want to, especially if it makes them kind of concerned. They're like going, oh my God, my kid's hearing voices.
Right, right. And
So,
let me just kind of jump in real quick.
yeah,
There has been many times in the past that parents, or I'd be talking to parents, I ask them, you know, what about your children? Your children see any kind of interesting little creatures or things like that? And sometimes they do, and sometimes they become, you know, they'll come back to me later and say, Jesus, they're kind of alarmed because of that. And I always tell them, just leave it alone. Don't tell them it's not real, because it probably is very real.
yeah.
And you do not want to suppress that type of information from them, because they don't need that. They need to say, okay, just listen to what they have to say, reassure them that probably nothing's going to happen that's really bad, but don't make them feel guilty, don't make them feel afraid
Or
etc.,
isolated.
or isolated. Make
Yeah.
sure that your communications are open between each other, that they can always come back. The kids can always come back to you and talk to you about the situation, so that you can stay abreast of what's going on. You don't want to let them isolate themselves where they enclose
Right.
in on each other.
Well, and you're already feeling isolated,
Right.
because it's like, well, do you as a child ask your sisters or your brothers and your parents, well, are you being taken to by these, you know, interesting little people? And they're just going to go, well, if your parents hear that, they're going to go, well, you know, it's your imagination. Now, with my parents, Michael brought something last night, an article I had written for Paranormal Underground. And it's an idea that I have that the Greys or any other alien species will actually use religion as a control mechanism, because religion is huge for everybody here on the planet, depending on what religion you believe in.
Mhm.
And so I often believe that the Catholic school I went to worked with the military, and then the aliens worked with the military. And so you have religion, and it's a huge part of the control mechanism that they use. Now, I was one of those abductees that if I cried and said, you know, in Jesus's name, leave me alone, they didn't leave me alone. And yeah, I was a child, and I had as much belief in what I was saying, like, yeah, it was like this table, it's like solid. I know God will protect me. But the one thing that I want to bring to everybody's mind is that, what if the aliens don't believe in Jesus Christ? And it's not that they're atheists, but what if they're from another world and their God is different, or how they believe in something is different? So is that going to have any power with them? And I think that the people who have actually had them leave, when they said stuff like that, they were leaving anyways. So I'm not saying that, and I'm going to probably get a lot of grief over this, and I understand that. But I truly know, with all the years of experience I've had dealing with these groups, that when they leave, they're ready to leave. they have control of the situation because they're dealing with technology that is far above anything that we, have ever seen. Maybe not now, because I'm sure a lot of it's been shared with different agencies and groups. But I think that if you look at it as a whole, they're too darn smart. And I don't think they disrespect the belief of religion, but I think that they use it to their benefit. And I think that anybody who says, well, when I said, in the name of God or Jesus Christ, they left, or they brought up Mary's name or Buddha or whoever you believe in, or Muhammad, I think that that's just the moment in time that they give you that memory of when they left. So it gives you that extra strong feeling of, okay, well, if I say this, they're going to go. And that's just my opinion on it, because we're dealing with a species that is so far advanced, and that they have a different perspective of what God is and what religion is. And you cannot, and I know this, if you know something, then, like, I know who they are, and I know that if I talk to them and said, look, this is scaring me, I don't like it, can you just ease up, they would. I believed in things in my 20s that I don't believe in now. So beliefs to me can change throughout every decade that you live, because as you mature and you grow, you change. So I truly believe that that they use religion, and people should know this as a control mechanism. And I often wonder, if people, when they have these abductions, are they talking to, or whatever religion they believe in, what are they saying, when they're freaking out and being when you're on the table and you're naked. And I remember this. It wasn't that I didn't know God was there. It was just that these beings give you a different state of mind. Because when something's going in your head, let's be realistic, when something is using telepathy to go in your head, that changes your whole perspective of what you believe. And then what is real, because at that moment in time, what is real is you're on a table and you're naked and they're doing things to you and they don't look like humans.
No, definitely don't look like humans, most of them. Now, there is some that can screen themselves that actually end up looking like humans, and it basically is there to make you feel.
It depends on what species. I mean, I've experienced the Nordics, yes, and with Kelly, with my ex-husband, and actually witnessed a UFO, went in the UFO, and Kelly knew her, which is interesting. I had memories come back up of Kelly, who is known as Thunderbow, who was a medicine man that I studied with, and he worked with the aliens. And then I had another friend, Woody, who, with Kelly and him and I, in my 20s, we would go and do different things with different alien groups. And I still have no memory of that, which is just nuts for me. And Woody would say to me, Rainbow, don't you remember what we used to go do? And I'd say, well, not really. I'm just this part came back to me. And I actually, what was really sad about my memory coming back is that when I finally got my memory back and remembered an experience that I had in Santa Rosa, New Mexico with Kelly when I was working cattle, by the time I could actually go meet up with Kelly and get confirmation, well, he already gave me confirmation, but before I could actually go and talk to him about it, he passed away, which is very sad, because that happens a lot with people. Once you start remembering, what ends up happening is that, the person that you can actually talk with and cross correlate what you remember and what happened, and it's all gone, because I couldn't do that anymore. But what's really interesting is just the fact of just memories that are blocked and how they block it, and how memories become unblocked. And I think that's really important to talk about too, is in any of these stories that you were told in your research, did they ever talk to you about how they felt their memories became unblocked.
Well, I think, yeah, some of them actually had, went to a hypnotherapist,
Regression.
regressed them.
Okay.
And that was one of the ways they found, they always had, almost everybody had little flashbacks.
Mhm.
Otherwise,
Yeah.
you
Oh,
probably
yeah.
wouldn't
Oh,
go
yeah.
to the hypnotherapist if you didn't think there was a problem. You just don't do that out of the blue typically.
Right. Yeah.
So anyways, typically there was always some kind of flashback, and then it all depends how much more curious you are. Sometimes a lot of people, I believe, ignore them. Will ignore a lot of these type of little flashbacks and just don't want to even, because they may just see a glimpse of an alien's head or a face, or maybe when an alien was real
Or
close.
you might be worried if you remember, they'll come back.
Right. Yes, it's like if you remember the name, that's the bad thing, or you remember the what you saw, that's a bad thing, and they're concerned about that. So you just try to shove it as far away in the back of your mind, or just out of your mind if possible, or maybe you start becoming addicted to something because it's such an anxiety to you.
Oh, talk about that. Let me just share. I had something
Okay.
very strange that was a habit that I know happened because I was always afraid when I was a child that I was going to get taken. And so when I would come home from school, or I would be out in the yard when I was, and let's just say from 6 on up to about, I still even do it now as an adult, but I try to stop myself. If a car or something would come by the house and I'd see it at a distance, I would go hide behind a bush and I duck for cover. And it was just a constant, it would be so strong in me that if I didn't dive into a bush, or I just didn't duck for cover, that it would, I would almost feel like I was going to just die. And so I was constantly, while I was outside playing or coming home from school, I was actually hiding in people's bushes if I knew a car was coming. And it just stemmed from that fear of being looked at and found. And I had a memory come back to me. It was unblocked. And all I could do is hear, and all I could do is feel, but I couldn't see anything. It was black. And I was running and I was running and I was running. And all of a sudden, hands grabbed at me and they picked me up. And all I remember is saying to myself, they got me. They got me. Oh my God, they caught me. And then I woke up and I was in a sweat. And this is me in my 20s when I have this memory. And so I realized at that time in my 20s that I had really significant, scary stuff happen with, as a child, trying to get away from whoever it is. So it could have been the military with the soldiers that I had to deal with. It could have been with the Greys themselves, other alien beings, or who knows what.
Mm-hmm.
But crazy stuff, like I'm claustrophobic. And I have a memory where I was 5 or 6 and I was in a big gray vat with green jelly like substance that was really sticky and thick, and they just dropped me in it naked and I couldn't feel the bottom. So I was trying to, my head was just right here, and this jelly greenish yellow stuff was right here.
Mm-hmm.
And they closed the lid on me, and there was a window and I could look out the window, and I didn't want to drown in this goopy stuff. And I was struggling and fighting to keep myself up above, because I would get tired and I'd come down, and then I'd freak out and then I'd come back up. And I think they had to have had me in there for an hour. It seemed like an hour. Maybe it's only 20 minutes or 15. And after that experience, I have been claustrophobic. I cannot be and Michael's witnessed this. I panic in an elevator. My daughter has witnessed this. I panic in an elevator.
Oh my gosh.
Yes.
Not a happy
No,
situation.
I have all the horrible symptoms of someone who's ready to just basically freak out.
Mm-hmm.
And it's from that memory of being put into something and having the lid drop down, and there's no way of getting out because it's thick metal. So I didn't know if I was going to be stuck in there for the rest of my life. I was going to die in there.
Right.
And And so that's part of the, this horrible creepiness of abductions, is that when you start remembering, you remember crazy shit, sorry, crazy stuff, where it's insane what you remember.
Right.
And that's the part that I think why people don't say anything, because if you talk about that, it's just like, it brings back all those emotions. Like, I'm even feeling it right now of being stuck in that thing. I feel it right now. And it's just like, and then one thing that I do is when I get all freaked out and anxious, I get all blotchy in my chest right here. I just from my neck here. And that stems from that anxiety that you get. And it's like, PTSD.
Sure, sure. One of the things one of the questions I ask people when I do interviews with abductees or contactees, I always ask them if they had a vivid memory, a memory that keeps on coming back. But the interesting thing about when I ask that, I also have to tell them this: it doesn't necessarily have to be an alien experience. It could actually be just looking at something, an object. I found that if people focus on an object or something that they have had these kind of memories and they keep on coming up and they don't understand why they're coming up, chances are, and it seems to hold true most of the time, they had some type of kind of a deeper experience. And I remember people saying, well, I always get this thing about like a crack in the sidewalk. I always remember a crack in the sidewalk. I don't know why I remember that, or I remember this, or I remember some things that had nothing to do with aliens. But I find out that it is a way that their mind departmentalizes that and keeps it in a corner somewheres. Now, me bringing it up or asking the question, a lot of times will kind of bring those memories back. Although that is sort of the reason why we were talking to each other, was kind of exploring what's going on with them and maybe trying to understand their abduction experience or the contact experience. And so I think in the long run, it did help. Although sometimes they were wondering why I was asking a kind of a silly question. But a lot of times you have to ask strange questions to almost trick your mind into releasing some of that stuff. And that's typically what happens. So I always tell people, if you have a memory, a vivid memory, either you dreaming at night or you actually remember it during the day, chances are there's something else going on here below the surface. And I think a lot of times it's really important to try to get that out and up to discuss it with somebody.
Exactly. Like I was telling Michael, for years, I had dreams of jumping out of planes. I've never jumped out of a plane in my life. I don't like the feeling. Oh, I hate that feeling. And I actually have had dreams where I'm spinning as I'm coming down. And I don't understand it. I've actually had memories of where I saw the land below and I'm looking down and I have no parachute on. I have nothing. I'm just dropping.
Right.
And I've had dreams where I'll come down really fast, and just before I think I'm going to splat on the ground.
Right.
I wake up, or something happens to where I don't, and it's really interesting. Or I'm lying there after I've hit the ground, and I can feel my bed, and then I'm just trying to figure out, did I have a past life of jumping out of planes like in World War II, or did something happen? And I truly believe that how I in my own mind dealt with it is, when I was a child, I would have these religious dreams. My parents said religious dreams. I don't think they were, where I'd be screaming and crying, and it was constant all the time. And I did a little sleepwalking, and it was just crazy stuff. And I think what would happen is that when I would come back from whenever them taking me, that that beam that they shoot down to either take people up or take people down, that I was experiencing either being taken up or being taken down.
Right.
And it's not like in the movies where people are just being pulled up and they're just like, hanging there and just being pulled up. I mean, you're being pulled up in every position you can imagine, maybe upside down.
Sure.
And maybe you're spinning as you're going up. I mean, it's not like you're It's something that is in a comfortable position. It's going to be sometimes in the most uncomfortable position. And I remember when I would be brought back down, I just would have that sick feeling in my gut, and I could never do rides after that. I was this young child that just could not do. I couldn't go to the state fair, and I couldn't do the crazy rides because I was already doing crazy stuff with the abductions, and that is so sad. And that's kind of how they isolate you in a way, because you're already feeling so weird and different as a child, especially children, that you get to a point to where you feel very different and strange as it is. And then then they have you right where they want you, because then you don't talk a lot about stuff, and then they can take you and do stuff to you. And then also, and I don't know if people mentioned this, I'm sure they did with the research, is that I woke up times where I had that substance that they put in you when they I guess when they do their exams on you, and it was that pink color, kind of like that strange, but it was very, very strange. Kind of had a kind of yellow and pink. But what was interesting is that I had that happen to me up until I was let's see, in my 40s, early 40s. And then thank God, and it stopped, because there's nothing like waking up in the middle of the night, and I'm telling you all this is just terrible. And you're going, did I eat something that upset my stomach? And then you go to the bathroom, and then you just see this weird substance coming out of you and your private parts, and you're going, what happened? What is going on? And I think that that's something else why people don't talk about it, is because it's embarrassing. How as a child, do you explain to your mother what this stuff is? And if, as a child, I mean, you don't know, you don't know how to explain it. As an adult, you would think I would have had the smarts to have taken that, whatever it was, and put it in a little bottle and had it, taken it to a lab and analyzed or whatever. But I just never wanted to even deal with it, because at the point when as an abductee, that they did another exam on you, that you get to the point to where you just don't want to deal with it anymore.
Right. Yeah, actually, it's interesting Rainbow said that. I mean, it was one of the subjects. Some people had mentioned that. Some of the people that I had several sessions with, they would talk about this kind of a discharge that looked like it was tinted kind of a reddish blood kind of a color, and it was something that was uncomfortable. It was uncomfortable to talk about.
Oh, it's embarrassing.
But they also were willing to at least want to say it, or see if anybody knew what it was. I mean, it didn't seem like none of them were like physically hurt or other than what is it type situation. I think maybe one person said it had it kind of itching. Some of them said that they actually came out of their ears, the same stuff. I think I had one that said out of the nose, and then of course the private areas, but it was different parts of your body. I don't know if there was any out of the eyes, but it was just strange. It's very strange stuff.
Then you get bloody noses all the time. As a child, I had them all the time.
Right.
And to where they wouldn't stop. And I went to the doctor, and the doctors, told my mom, oh, well, she's just, it's dry, or it's this, or it's that. But I would get bloody noses at all times of the day, even when it was, wasn't really dry out when it was raining. I mean, I would get bloody noses no matter what time of the day.
Right.
And you have to question that.
Right. I mean, that was a common thing, was really the bloody noses.
Skin rashes too.
Yeah. And anyways, the bloody noses was really strange. Among almost everyone that I pretty much determined was an abductee had the bloody noses, especially when they were younger. And, I'm not saying there wasn't, but there was one story I always remember, where this woman, she was at the grocery store, and her nose started bleeding. and she happened to be up at the checkout when she was checking out. And for some reason, not only was her nose bleeding, but she had a sneeze. She sneezed and something came out of her nose, and it was, basically what we would consider an implant. It was something that was more than just something from your nose that normally would come out of your nose, because it was somewhat metallic. It was sometimes kind of a natural thing, and it was pretty dang embarrassing because it actually came out on. So she was just beside herself because she didn't know what it was.
Yeah.
And I don't remember if she picked it up or what she did, but she was just like freaking completely out.
Oh, I hope she picked it up.
Well, yeah, well, I don't remember. I didn't, you know what? I sort of was like, okay, great.
I mean, it's
nice,
not funny, but you know,
on.
it's like,
Yeah, but
Mm.
definitely there was people that, there was a relationship between implants, bloody noses,
And-
all different times of the day, and then they would
Right.
just go away and they would be fine. But then they'd come back again.
And come back for no reason. I remember
No
just
reason
being
at all.
watching TV and then it
Right.
come down, and it's like, are you kidding me?
Right.
And then my sister and I, my older sister and I, talked about rashes that we had growing up. I mean, I had the most unusual rashes, and I had rashes all the time, and I had them around my ankles and my calves. And then my sister and I had a horrible rash under the armpits. And then what is that? What is it that I got last year? I can't remember. Then we got all kinds of weird stuff, and then I would get like some kind of weird mole or something on me that would just, I mean, and I'm not kidding you, would just come overnight. Just
Right.
would be there, and it just, and I'd show my mom, and she'd go, "Well, why didn't you tell me that you have this, like weeks ago?" And I'm like, "Well, what do you say? It wasn't there weeks ago," because they won't believe you. So it's just one of those things where you just get all these strange ailments, and I think it really has a lot to do with the exams. How, if you're in a UFO, if you're dealing with aliens, if you're dealing with anything that has to do with something that's not on this planet. And I think that is just how our body reacts, the immune system reacts to stuff.
Right. I mean, obviously, the aliens, I'm sure, or the Greys or whatever, I'm sure they have other type of things that, you're going to probably have contact with. And because of that, you're going to have some reaction to, I'm sure.
Yeah.
And they actually, it's the same thing. We could have something that they have to be very careful too.
Yeah, I'm sure. Yeah. And then also I wanted to talk about is strange needle marks that come out of nowhere, where and Michael's seen them, where and in the common place that they like to do the shots or whatever they're doing is right here, and it's always 3 little needle marks in the shape of a pyramid.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And or they'll do 3 needle marks in a line.
Right.
And then always have little bruise marks around where the needle marks are. And so I had one that happened just 2 months ago. Mm-hmm. So I woke up one morning and I showed it to Michael and I said, look at this. And then they usually go away within days, a couple days. Right. And so and it never feels sore, but I'll get, for some reason, just I know that it's like a needle mark because it's somehow I can just sense that something's been done to me, and I'll know where to look on my body. It's either here or it's either here on my hand, or it's so it's usually on the arms. But that's unusual, and I just often wonder, do other abductees have that happen to them, where every so often you wake up with needle marks on you?
Well, yes, the answer is yes, and they're very similar, because there was times when I lived in Georgia where I was really into the abduction, interviews, etc. I would get people that would email me or have a picture or something when we were talking and showed it to me, this happened to them. Because back at that time, a lot of that, there was no computers or there wasn't any internet or anything like that. But so they typically would have a picture, or they'd even show me, physically show me. And typically there was on the arms, although there was other people that had it on their back, on their
legs
shoulder,
too.
on, you know, a lot of where they had scoop marks. You know, we didn't talk about scoop marks, but scoop marks
Oh,
on
and
the knees.
yeah, I have
and
two
on the
scoop marks down here that
Right.
have scarred me.
Right. And so
Yeah.
that they would always, they could show those. So, and it was pretty common. Again, those people that I felt had those type of experiences typically will always have some kind of, I don't want to call it branding, but it's a little bit of that at times. I felt it was like a brand or something, not that they were doing that, but I think they were obviously, I think they were taking tissue for some reason.
I think it's more for lab work and for stuff that they're doing. I don't think it's a brand. I think it's a product of an examination room and them just.
Well, some of the scoop marks, the only thing is that I seem to notice from my own standpoint, because I had the opportunity to look at many different people's scoop marks, was that some of them were very identical, were absolutely identical to the other person's. And to me, that was the first thing that went through my mind. I'm thinking of, you know, it was like sort of like a little bit of a brand, and it sort of was, because it's very possible the person that, you know, the being or whatever it was that did the scoop mark on this person may have done it on this person. That's what I meant by that, really, a brand. It was just,
but for me, it's more of a procedure.
right.
I think it's just an end result of a procedure that is common amongst these specific alien groups who are testing different aspects of their, you know, of the people that they're actually interested in.
Right. And the injection, the marks that were just like pinholes, those basically could be two things. They could be taking something out, or they could be putting something in.
Yeah.
So, you know, they could be injecting with something to see what your reaction is, or maybe even enhancing you in some ways. It's very possible. So anyways, there is a lot of that going on. I personally feel that there was more in certain times going backwards. I don't hear about it as much nowadays, but I'm not in the middle of it. I'm not in the middle of that right now.
Well,
we
really haven't done the abductions in a long while.
Abductions for a while.
And I think that has to do with too I think it's really important for people who actually have the experiences to kind of connect with each other and to find out answers. But then there gets to be a point to where you can't let it rule your life. And there's other things that Michael and I like to do research on outside of alien abductions. But for me, I've been dealing with alien abductions since I was a child. And at a certain point, you just have to come to terms with it and come to peace with it, because you can't let it rule your life. And the interesting thing too is that up until I was 44, and I told this to Michael, that I would get that feeling in my stomach that I was pregnant. And this is another thing that I think a lot of abductees go through, especially females.
Yeah, well, I was saying
And
more females.
Yeah, and so I'd get that little butterfly feeling in my stomach, and that's the feeling that I had when I was pregnant with my daughter. And so what's interesting is that I would actually get sore breasts, and my body would start acting like I was pregnant, and that would be crazy for me because I had my tubes tied. So I'm thinking, I can't be pregnant. I know I'm not pregnant. But I know that didn't stop this group from, you know, doing whatever they were going to do to get the eggs out, or put a little something in me and then take it out. I don't know. But all I know is that for many, many years, all the time, I would get that feeling of where I'd be pregnant and my breast would be sore. And I thought, okay, it's my period or whatever. And no, it wasn't that at all, because it would come at a time just like, you know, a week after my period. And I'd be going, this is crazy. Or it'd be after a time when I was celibate. I hadn't been with anybody. So it's one of those things where also they can, and I didn't like this part of it, where I believe this is what they were doing, but they were using my body as a way of a little incubator for a little baby.
Sure.
And so, or the fetus, and for a certain amount of time, when they would take the baby out. And I think that for me, I just sensed that I was being used for that. And I didn't like that. And I know that at the time that all of this was happening, that I felt like when I would be taken, in fact, I woke up one time where, and this is really strange, I woke up and the soul part of what I am was in this containment metal glass jar thing, and I was looking out, but I could actually go through it and see what these beings were doing. And they had my body on a big in a long table, and they had my body was taken apart, and I freaked out. I thought, oh my God, they're taking my body apart, and this is terrible. I must have died or something's happening. And they were really tall, Nordic looking aliens, but they were like giants. They were huge. Anyways, long story short, when I was brought back, I felt like you had said, like I had been enhanced. And I felt like that's part of what they do to make sure that as females that we're healthy, so that we can keep carrying the fetuses.
Sure.
And maybe some people think that's nuts. I don't care. I don't care anymore. Because I have these experiences happen to me. I have very good recall when it comes to these kind of experiences, and I know what I saw. And that's just what I think. And I think once I hit 44, they weren't interested anymore. And so as women get older, then we don't have to worry about it. I don't know how it is for men if they take the sperm or whatever. How I guess they can take it from men
For quite a while. Yeah. Probably.
Yeah,
in the
but for women,
70s or so.
it's different.
Yeah. No, definitely it is different for the women.
Yeah.
And there always was, I mean, I guess I never really looked at ages so much, and I guess I should have paid more attention when I was interviewing, especially women in this case. I guess most of the women, I'm just going back in my mind right now, most of them were in their 20s, 30s, and 40s. There wasn't that many that were still active, that had active abductions. There were people, of course, that were older that were just talking about those earlier years, but they weren't really having active abduction type situations. The only exception was some of these women were being taken back to actually interact with some of their, I guess, their hybrid children. Now that was fairly common, where women were in their 60s and 70s and were actually having kind of like an abduction situation where they were actually carried back onto a big ship or some sort or someplace, and basically presented with these children, which they were told that these children were actually part of their, they were part of their body. Basically, they were carried by them, and they were part of the body.
Well, they were the mom.
They were the mom. Yes, that's right. Yeah, I guess that's
what they were alien and human.
Alien, human, and they were abducted. So, anyways, yeah. So that was kind of that.
Yeah, I think those programs, I don't really understand where they're taking the children and what they're doing with the children. But I've always felt that it's not good to keep the children from the human side of who they are, because if these children, they need to understand that they are hybrids, and I think they have to understand that even though they have this, obviously the other half is alien, that they have that emotional connection to humanity. And I've always wondered if they didn't want these children too connected to their mothers or even their fathers, because men have even stated that they have seen their children as well. They've been shown their children. And I just always wondered why they just didn't let them spend more time with them. Or maybe they did and they just don't have any memory. But I always wondered why these children didn't come back as adults to say, hey mom, hey dad, or whatever, because if you're in this experience and you're dealing with this, you're going to welcome your own kids. It might be a little freaky, but I think the bottom line for most people is that, that it's like, hey, because I would want to know mine.
Right.
I'm sure you'd want to know yours.
Yeah, but I think it would be, there's also this consideration that if you're not going to be able to be with them more than a few hours here and there. I don't know. I mean, it's like, wow, you'd be longing for that person unless they can kind of block that out of your memory. And maybe, like Rainbow said, maybe that you're actually with these children on a longer term.
Well,
And
if you think about how many fetuses I think that I had where they took them out of me, because I remember when they would, I knew instinctively when I woke up the next day, they took it out of me. I knew it.
well, how many times did that happen?
Multiple.
Oh.
So I mean, if that's the case, and I know it is, then I have multiple, alien children out there. I don't have memory of seeing them. And then that makes me wonder too, because I had the sense when I was young, and this is, I don't know if any of the people you talked to had heard this, where I was already called a hybrid, where the aliens, where the Greys were telling me I was already told I'm a hybrid already. So I don't know what to think about that. So, and this is another question too, is the Rh negative blood.
Right, well, that's kind of a whole other
subject. Yeah, I know that's a whole nother subject, but what I'm saying is that I was the only one out of my sisters. There's 3 of us where I had it, where my mom had to get those shots.
Shots, right.
To keep her body from rejecting me.
Right.
So
yeah.
Yeah, for hurting me. Yeah.
Yeah, right. Well, rejecting you early.
And what was interesting is that from the moment on, from this happening, even before I was born, that already placed me in a different position in the family, because you're already, life is already like, there's a danger and a risk there even before you're born.
Mm-hmm.
And so then you come out, and then I remember that, and this is something else that's really interesting, and I'd like to know if anybody else thinks this too. The doctor who took care of us at the time, he was former, I think he had been at I think I checked on this, that he had been at Kirtland Air Force Base. I think he was there. I don't know if he was stationed there, but I don't know if he was a doctor there or whatever. But his name is Dr. Greenblatt. Mm-hmm. And when they're dealing with hybrid children, and when they're dealing with some of the MK Ultra, they deal with doctors who have specific names of color. So my doctor was Dr. Greenblatt. Now, I don't know if there's anything to that, but what I do remember is that Dr. Greenblatt would come to the house, and this is in the 70s. They didn't do house calls, at this time anymore. You took your kids to the office. Clinic, right. And so he would come to the house, and he would take special care in checking me out and figuring out what was going on with me. And he's the one that actually was the doctor when I was born. But what was really interesting that he took a lot of care, and a unique, bizarre type of care, to the point to where I always felt creepy around this guy. Mm-hmm. And he's the nicest guy to my family. But sure, for me, as a young child, it was just creepy, because he would just give me too much attention. And I always wondered about that. And then from the time I went to the Catholic school, and then it was being bused to the base, that certain people, some children, are just targeted from the point of birth. And what happens there? And then does it have to do with the Rh negative? Do they look for kids like that? Do they look for kids whose parents were part of the Air Force or any part of the military? So do they look for military families? I didn't come from a military family, because by the time I was born, my dad wasn't in the military anymore. But he was in the military. He was in the military, right, for a short time. So I'm just wondering, how is it that they do? Because I felt like from the time I was born all the way up until probably I was about 16, When I was 16, I think they finally kind of just said, hey, let's let her have a semi-normal, high school years or whatever. And I felt less stuff happening, even though I felt even more isolated when I was 16, because of everything that I had happening to me before that. So I just wonder how they know to pick certain children. And what's interesting too, that I think a lot of people talk about it, but a lot of people don't know, is that when you're dealing with the alien abduction phenomena, then you're dealing with the paranormal, because I had so much paranormal stuff happening to me, to the point to where my parents were very aware that there's a lot of paranormal stuff happening around me all the time. I heard voices, not just, from the closet. I saw spirits. I had every kind of strange thing that you can imagine happen that's been in the movies. And so with alien abductions, does the paranormal, is it more intense with those people?
Yeah, absolutely. Right. So one of the things, obviously, after years of doing these interviews, there was a list of things that I came together on, and they were certain things like the people that have abductions basically could see UFOs better than
All the
anybody
time.
else, all the
Yes,
time, where
yeah.
other people could be standing right next to them and they wouldn't see them at all, but they could see them. They were usually able to heal people. They were also healers. They could be healers. They could be musically inclined. They could have musical abilities.
Empaths.
They could be, so they seem to have more abilities if they were under this abduction program or whatever it was. So there was things that were, maybe they were getting enhanced. I'm not 100% sure how that worked out, but they all seem to have some of these common things that, and they had these vivid memories, as I said. They had these vivid memories.
Oh yeah.
So that was.
Yeah, totally. So it's really interesting if you look at it as a whole, what encompasses the alien abduction experience, because it's not just one thing, and not everybody experiences the same thing when they're dealing with this. Everybody deals with different aspects of it. But one thing that I think we all have in common is, at certain points throughout this experience, that isolation feeling is prevalent there through a large part of our lives, because it's not like you can relate to just anybody about this. You can't just say, oh, hey, I was abducted, by aliens, and people are going to go, okay, all right, so I'm not going to be friends with you. And so you're quiet because you don't want people to think you're nuts. But then what you do is you implode, because then you have all this stuff happening to you, and then there's who do you talk to? So that's why it's important to talk with groups, and to go out and search for people who understand all of this. And because I'm saying this, I want anybody who's listening to this, who has had experiences, to feel free to email Michael and I, and we'll be happy to talk to you about it. And then, especially me, because if it's happened, I probably experienced it.
Yeah, and then let me just say this about myself. I'm quite confident that I've had experiences, or I've been abducted, or had contact somewhere.
I have memory of Michael with his first wife.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah, I had met Michael before I met Michael. Yeah, we were in a huge football field, and there was a big spacecraft, and Michael was running with his wife, and he grabbed me, and I was probably about 14, 13 at the time, and he grabbed me and he pulled me to a side area where we could duck and hide. And so when I saw him many, many years later, I recognized him immediately. A ball of energy hit my solar plexus when I saw him, and I went, oh my God. And so I found it very crazy that I can have that. And I've had that memory, has been clear to me from the moment I had that experience. And, he took me and pulled me aside to protect me. And so, so I have that memory of Michael.
Gosh. Yes.
I know,
She did
it's a
tell,
little crazy.
yeah, she did tell me about
Yeah,
that. It's quite
yeah.
fascinating. And the interesting thing about it is, I remember her kind of describing my ex at the time when we met. It was my ex-wife, of course, and she had passed away at the time. But I think you actually kind of described her and was pretty dang close. And I know you never saw a picture of her at that time.
No, I didn't.
Because
no. And then when I saw a picture of her, I'm like, that's her.
It's a reconfirmation.
Yeah, it was a confirmation. Yeah.
She finally saw a picture. So
yeah,
that was pretty amazing.
Yeah, that was crazy. Yeah.
So I have a story or two. Can I tell a couple more stories? Okay.
Of course.
Let's do it. So anyways, my sister was a doctor.
Still is.
She still is. And she would go when I lived in Georgia. We would go, and she lived in South Carolina, so we'd meet up. And she was kind of involved too. She kind of heard stories, and she has some of her own interesting stories. But she also had somebody that worked for her that has some pretty amazing stories. And the reason I say it was amazing is because this was a whole extended family that was very much aware of their encounters. Generational, yes, from little kids all the way up. The little kids, they would always see little aliens, they'd see little creatures, everything. They would see all kinds of different things, and the parents were very open to it. They never told them, no, you don't see that, or it's just, don't talk about that, etc. No, they were very open. They let them talk about it. And I think because of that, it was made this whole situation, helped develop this whole situation where they had all these encounters over the years. So anyways, we went out to their house, one of their homes, and it was, again, I think there was a couple of the relatives that lived with this woman, and her name is Marie, and her husband's name is Billy, and they had 2 children. I don't remember their names. But anyways, we went out there, my sister and I, and first thing I noticed, even before she told us the story, was that I happened to just walking around the property, looking around, and I saw this 20-foot circle right next to they lived in a double wide trailer, this 20-foot circle of no vegetation. It was just weird
Was
looking.
it dirt? Was it dried grass? What was
it was mainly dirt. In the middle, there was some grass, but it was this circle that was primarily dirt, basically. But there was grass all around it. And so anyway, so I didn't know at that point, she didn't tell me the story. Well, as the story goes, when she was 9 years old, she had a major abduction series of events in which she was constantly taken night after night after night. And they used to land this craft, which was, she described it being about 20 feet, which matched that circle perfectly. And she said that it would land right by the house, right there, and they would take her up, and most of the typical stuff that we've talked about already would happen to her, and they brought her back. Well, come to find out, I got one of our trips over there to talk to her. She agreed to bring in several of her rest of her family members, and it would take us hours to discuss everything that we went over. But I will tell you, it was the most extensive, extended family interview with people that had these abduction experiences, and it was all of them. They all just sat there and they told their story. It was absolutely incredible stories. And actually, some of the stories you can see on True Secret Forum. I put them up on True Secret Forum. Are we going to put those marks on there? By the way, I'm just talking about. We want to put those photographs of your marks, or no?
Yeah. No. Yeah. No. Yeah.
Okay,
we'll do it on True Secret Forum.
Right.
I have them on my phone, and I could put it up to the camera, but I don't think it'd work. But yeah, we'll have a couple of my photographs of my marks.
Yeah, and I think there'll be people out there that actually have similar ones. I don't think.
Yeah, the pyramid really kind.
Right, yeah. The pyramid kind, exactly. Yeah. Well, anyways, talking about that, Marie and her husband Billy, but Marie had multiple scoop marks on her neck, and she showed me multiple marks and scars that she had too, that she is saying it came from the abduction experience that she had. That's what reminded me of. So anyways, so there was all these, everybody told their story. It was incredible stories, and it went on for years, this whole thing. And what happened was at the very end, this is really amazing. For some reason, they were able to sense when these aliens would come to their house. It got to that point, they would sense. Well, let me back up a little bit. At first, what they would see is these huge owls and big eyes of deer. Deer would come to the house, right next to their house, and they would actually look in the windows. And they were like these deer that looked strange because their eyes were like double their size. Deer have big eyes, but these were really amazingly big. And of course, owls have big eyes, period, right? But they would have, they'd be coming back to their house, and they would see these owls, which were 3 to 4 feet high, standing in their driveway. Well, come to find out, they figured it out finally, and I could have told them what it was, but they figured out these were actually aliens that had screened their appearance and made them look like owls and made it look like deer, which made them look not as scary. Okay, so that's pretty common. So at the very end, kind of to wrap this up with them, was that they had this amazing encounter. So they, for some reason, they had several of the people over that had been abducted. And what happened was they were drawn outside, and there was probably, I think they said 5 or 6 gray aliens, different sizes. They said talls, mediums, different sizes, and they all kind of were lined up there. And they lined up there, for some reason, the family lined up across from them, and I can't remember, it was maybe 20 feet. And they looked at each other and stared at each other. It seemed like forever. And they said that was the end of it. They don't even know why this all happened, but it was the most incredible thing.
Well, it was probably telepathy, and they just probably don't remember what the messages were.
Maybe they didn't, but they remember the fact that was the last time they seemingly remember any kind of encounter. And it was just, I remember them calling and said, "You won't believe what happened last night. This is what happened." And then after that, I would call them back periodically and say, "Have you had any encounters?" And that call them back for years. And they said, "No, not that we can remember." But they had a period, probably 20 years of these type of encounters. And their kids grew up, but they always talked about it. It was like in their little family meetings or gatherings, when there just was their families there, they would talk about these encounters. And it would be like talking about the weather. It wasn't a big deal. And I think because of that, it wasn't a big deal. It enhanced the whole situation.
That's a good point. I think that you just eventually have to come to peace with it.
You have to come to peace. And if there's other people that have had these experiences, talk to them. It's incredible, but you probably learn from those conversations. And one conversation will lead to another conversation. And it's pretty incredible. It's like when I used to talk to some people that thought maybe they did have encounters, and we would I'd bring up a few little things. And then 2 weeks later, they call me back and say, "Oh, you know what? I remembered something after you told me this, or you brought this up, you brought that up." And it was incredible how it worked. It just like triggered something.
It takes the blocks away.
Right. It takes
is what it does. Is that I think at a certain point, I think that the way that our brains are made, that we have the ability to take the blocks away ourselves. And that's one thing that I have learned, that I know is my truth, is that I can take the blocks away the way that I need to, in the time space that I need to. And that if there's certain blocks I choose to leave, then I leave them.
Right.
Because not everything that I want to remember, especially not the scary crap that I experienced. So.
Right. So.
And you have another story?
Well, yeah, I have one more. This is, I'm going to try to keep this one short. It's quite a story that took quite a few years to develop. So when I lived in Georgia, this is again Georgia, because I spent a lot of time doing research there, even though we do research here, but not so much in this vein. So I'm going to tell you about something I call the blue fog. And what's interesting about this concept of blue fog, first of all, I got to tell you, I lived in an area in Georgia. It was called Peachtree City. And in Peachtree City, what is unique about it, it's a beautiful place, but what's extra unique about it, it was where many of the Delta pilots lived. Okay, so I befriended several Delta pilots. I think was one American and a couple Deltas. So I became friends with them. And so we used to talk about stories, and I kind of would bring up, I was interested in UFOs, hoping that they would have some stories to tell. Well, I always remember this one night, we all went out, we were drinking, and we probably had too much to drink, but which was fine. From from a standpoint that I got some really good information, and
So they drank and you didn't.
no,
Because you're not a drinker.
no. But I had a couple. I had a couple beers. Okay, but the point was they had a couple beers too, so they were loose a little
Couple
bit
more
loose.
beers than you.
No, I don't think they had. We weren't drunk. Let's put it this way.
Yeah.
What they were telling me I felt was pretty good, but they were loosened up a little bit. So, anyways, what one of them told me, in fact, what was interesting, I got this, two of them confirmed this story. And then at another event, maybe it was a cookout or something, I talked to another pilot and he kind of confirmed it. And they were all separate on separate airplanes at separate times. So anyways, what they said, and it was very consistent between the three pilots, was that they had in their life, during their, as pilots, and I think two of them were like 30-year type guys, they were kind of ready to
during
retire.
their careers.
Right, during their careers. They remember some things where UFOs would come next to their plane. Okay, they would see them. Some of them were big, some of them were small. And then shortly thereafter, the cabin would fill with this light, kind of bluish blue fog. Okay. And typically what happened is that it almost seemed like everybody went to sleep, although the plane was being flown fine. It seemed to get to their destination fine.
With them, the pilots, or the whole
No,
plane?
the whole plane filled with this
Oh,
stuff.
wow.
Yeah. But because I think he said that this one pilot said that the flight attendant called and said there seems to be a little something in the plane, and they didn't know what it was. It wasn't really upsetting anybody,
Is it
but
a
it looked
light?
like it. No, it was actually like some kind of a fog. It looked like
Did
a
she
fog.
say fog?
Well, she said there was something blue, that the interior was turning blue,
Blue,
she said.
okay.
And I that's all she really said, and he didn't know what to say either.
Yeah.
And he just kind of left it.
Yeah.
And all three of them said this, and it always happened after the UFOs were next to them.
Oh.
And my feelings are, even though they got to their destination, it wasn't really any problems. I don't think they reported any of this. They just basically told me and confirmed it between each other.
Mhm.
They probably talked among themselves.
Mhm.
And that's what he said they do a lot. The pilots see UFOs. If you've been in the a career of flying aircraft, you probably have seen a UFO. But they basically don't really report it. Very seldom do they report it unless something really bad happens.
Yeah.
They keep it to themselves. They may talk to their buddies about it and just compare notes, and that's it. Well, I got lucky. They compared notes, and I happened to be there when they were comparing their notes. So anyways, so this has happened, but my feelings are, this is just my feelings, that those planes probably were abducted and taken somewhere completely. And whatever happened, maybe it took 10 minutes. They never had any recollection of anything happening, but I had a distinct feeling if I could have talked to those other people in there, we would have found out those planes were taken somewhere, and they were, a whole series of stuff happened.
Right.
They were put back in those planes, and their planes went and landed, and it all happened in at least in a short time. You always got to remember, alien time and human time are two different things.
Well, aliens don't have time like we.
Right, exactly.
Doesn't
So
exist.
what I'm saying is, you could be 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 100 minutes, whatever it is. Those planes could be delayed, could be 15 minutes late, and that could be a much longer time in the world of aliens when they take you somewhere. So their time was different than our time. So that's what I think happened. So what I'm saying is, that was kind of, I consider that as a mass where a bunch of people are taken at one time and probably abducted. Like I said, a couple of them felt, let me just tell you, the pilots, a couple of them felt sick after that experience. I think he did say that a couple of people were also kind of nauseated afterwards. That was really it. Didn't seem like anybody else had any kind of issues that they were aware of. But of course, you got to remember, when you land that plane and those people get off their plane, they go home, you don't really, there's no opportunity to follow up with them. There was no something or ate, or maybe they had some really weird dreams later, but there was nobody there to follow up with them. And of course, that the aliens don't really want you to do all that stuff. So anyways, that was an interesting thing. Happened to, 3 different times to 3 different pilots and 3 different planes. So I thought that was pretty incredible stuff. So
yeah. Lastly, we wanted to mention our friends, Mary Munoz and Hannah Thornson. And Mary and Hannah wrote a book called Mystical Signatures. And it's a book about their experiences with their lives as abductees. I highly recommend it. It's a great book. You can buy it on Amazon, and it's called Mystical Signatures. And you can actually go to their website, mysticalsignatures.com, and that's spelled MYSTICALSIGNATURES.com.
Rainbow, can I just jump in there?
What?
I think isn't that their
Mystical Signatures is the name of their website, and it's also the name of the
is
book.
the name of the book? I guess I
So
thought
you
it
don't
was
even
some,
know that, do you?
no, I actually thought it was something.
No,
it was
no,
signatures of a abductee.
No.
Okay. Okay, sorry.
Michael doesn't know.
Okay.
The name of their website is mysticalsignatures.com, and that's the name of their book, Mystical Signatures.
Okay.
And Hannah did another book. It's actually a journal. It's called Contactee Journal, and it's many times bought along with Mystical Signatures. And it's a journal that if you've had experiences, and I think it's like 200 pages of different ways you can write down your experiences. And it's something that you can have. It's hands-on if you've had something happen and you need something to write it down on. So look for her journal. I understand it's wonderful. So mysticalsignatures.com. Name of the book is called Mystical Signatures, and Hannah's book is called Contactee Journal. And there's many other things and items on their website as well. They do readings. They have tarot cards that are amazing. They are both artists and they do beautiful work. So we highly suggest that you go see them. We'll put the information down below.
Right, great. Yes, it'll be in the description part. Okay, so
anybody has any experiences and wants to share any stories with us, please feel free to contact us at dimensionalwalking@gmail.com. You can also go to Michael's website.
Yes,
Your website.
trueseekerforum.com. Well, she said my website, even though I obviously had it for 13 years now, but some of the most recent, the last several years, Rainbow has a lot of articles on there, some really great stuff on there. So come and see us there also. And I think you have to remember something. Between Rainbow and I, we have over 100 years of paranormal.
100.
100.
You look pretty good for being 100.
No. Between us, we have 100 years. There's 100 years of experience. 100 years of experience of paranormal research.
Yeah.
Okay, just so you know.
100.
So we know a few. We know a few things. We're
that
not,
makes us old.
I'm the one that's old. You're young. You put it together, it's over 100 years.
Okay.
So hey, listen, and also please subscribe. We need your subscriptions, and if you like us, put a like.
Yeah, thumbs up and pass this along too.
Right.
If you know anybody who's had experiences who, they can check out this episode and see what they think, and they can contact us.
Yeah, we have I think there's 13 episodes on there now, but there will be many, many more. And I don't know if the cat's going to attack the dog here.
Earlier, the dog was snoring, and I tried to wake her up so that she wasn't snoring during Michael's talking. But she moved.
She moved because he wants to get in there.
He's lying down. No, BC, don't lick your.
Okay, well let's move on. Okay.
Stop that.
Okay. Anyways, okay, we'll see ya. Take it easy. We love you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.